next speaker is going to talk about how his nonprofit is helping to shine light on political and humanitarian issues. Please welcome up Witnesses, Samir Padini.
Hi, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be at ETech. It's an amazing thing to watch from afar, so to be here is very, very exciting indeed. I'm Samir Padania, and I work for a human rights organization called Witness. We were founded in 1992 by Peter Gabriel, and we were founded with the mission to open the eyes of the world to human rights violations. In the 17 years since we were founded, we've trained and supported hundreds of human rights organizations, thousands of human rights activists to document, expose, and end human rights violations using video and new technologies. Now, you can learn more about the work of Witness on witness.org. I'm not going to talk more about that. I'm going to talk about a new project at Witness, which is called the Hub. And it's essentially a video sharing community for human rights. It's a sort of social media in the service of human rights. And anyone can use it. It's upload, download, connect, share, all the usual sorts of functions. So why would we set something like this up when social media exists? There's all kinds of different things that you can use already, that activists, as Ethan talked about last year, are using already. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the how we built it, but today in this keynote, I want to talk about why we built it, because the rationale is an extremely important thing to understand. Witness, by the way, the Hub is at hub.witness.org, so you don't have to Google it. Witness was born into a very, very different world. The sort of media landscape, the activism landscape was very, very different than it is now, than the type of world we're talking about here at ETech. The technology we had access to, the opportunities to connect, the opportunities to film abuses and expose them and share them was limited. We had limited media, we had limited opportunities to participate. Closed societies at that time were closed. There was really very little that leaked out. You had journalism, but again, it was very top level. We didn't hear anything from the ground. And then, back then, the technology that we had access to wasn't exactly as it is now. Now, we have these, and then back then we had these. These were bulky, expensive, they're not, they looked portable for the time, but they're not that portable. To get footage off these and get it from, let's say, Burma to New York, which was something that Witness used to do, it took weeks. It would be filmed secretly, it would be smuggled over the border. It was an extremely complicated and dangerous chain of work. And it was slow, as I say. We go to this now, and this, you can go down to your pharmacy, you can buy one of these cameras in a local pharmacy. And your cell phone, the thing you make calls on, is also the same kind of technology. By and large, most of you are going to have complex cell phones, and an increasing number of people around the world have access to these kinds of cell phones. Hundreds of millions of people, citizens, activists, all kinds of people have access to this kind of technology now. And they're beginning to use it to document and share images of human rights violations, and to act, to promote action. You just have to think back to the start of this year, not very far from here actually, Oakland, in the BART station in the early hours of New Year's Day, when Oscar Grant was shot dead by a police officer. He was restrained, he was on the ground, he was shot dead. There were sort of 3 or 4, I think, people who filmed that with their mobile phones or their digital cameras. So it's a very sort of emerging way that people are reacting to events around them. They're filming stuff, they're sharing it, they're putting it online. And the monks in Burma, you remember the monks in Burma. 18 months ago or so. They were filmed marching in the streets, protesting against the regime. You know, this is part of a trend that you'll all have heard of, or many of you will, surveillance. But part of the reason I want to talk today is because Ethan talked about this last year, and it was very much about the positive uses of technology in order to drive activism, to drive awareness, to drive action. But one of the things, and the message of Ethan's talk was really that the technologies are there and activists are using them already, and that non-profits, for example, are not, are taking advantage of these tools as well, but that, building new ones is not necessarily the way forward. The thing is that the people on the front line, the people who are dealing with these dangers day in, day out, the people who are filming, the people who are abused, tracked down by their governments are the ones who know least about the dangers. They don't know that when you film something on a cell phone, it leaves a trace. If you put it on a network, it leaves a trace. Your hardware has a signature. All of these different layers, which here we know about, but there they don't. Taking that Burma example, the government of Burma, the videos that we saw on our news channels online, the government of Burma used those very same videos to track down and imprison up to 1,000 activists who had aided and abetted people by filming video, by sharing it online, and so on. So this is something we have to really think about. We really do need to take account in the way that we use and build technology of these end users. Now, there's there are ways around it. There are ways that activists have found, some creative activists have found. For example, the use of phones, they use Bluetooth to share short videos. People do it all over the developing world because it's free. You don't have to go onto a network to do it. But there's a byproduct of that, which means that it doesn't hit the network and it's relatively untraceable. If you share a piece of satire about the government, you share a piece of footage that is of a human rights violation or a testimony by somebody. If it's off the network, in a sense, it's fine. You can share it. You can be sitting in this space. You can be sitting in a cafe, on a bus. You don't even have to look at the other person, but you can share something with them. You can communicate with them using your phone, using Bluetooth. And activists are doing this. But it's not just activists. And the next example I want to talk about is about how perpetrators, human rights abusers, do the same thing. So this is a video from Egypt. This is inside a police station. This is a police officer. It's being filmed by a police officer as well. And he's intimidating the suspect. He's beating him. Now, for years and years and years in Egypt, people were talking about, human rights organizations were reporting on torture. They were saying it was happening inside police stations. They were saying it was happening to people like this. And there was never any evidence. You can see it's not the most brutal clip, but it's definitely humiliating. It's definitely something that's, humiliating to this guy. And what these police do is they film these incidents, and what they do is they Bluetooth them around to other police. They use them to intimidate people on a local level. Intimidation works like that. It works on a local level. It works in an intimate level, and it's suffocating on a local level. And so the strategies that activists need to use to counter that are, to fight intimidation, it's about oxygen, it's about sunlight. That's what we look at. This is just a very quick run-through of what happened when these videos, this was one of about 30 videos that an Egyptian blogger received, a guy called Wael Abbas. Some of you may have heard of this case. People were sort of sending him these videos. He was a blogger and a journalist. He started posting them on his blog. And he used YouTube. He uploaded them to YouTube. It's quick, it's easy. he has a low bandwidth connection. And he started to circulate these videos along with his peers, his other blogger friends in Egypt. He was writing in Arabic to make it easier for local youth to hear about it, but there were others blogging in English. So bloggers like myself and many other sort of international bloggers writing about human rights also blogged about them. And this reached the international media. It reached the international NGOs. And the pressure looped back into Egypt to the extent where it created a public debate where there'd been no public debate before. It also pushed the government and the authorities to really take a little bit of accountability. There was clearly much more global and public scrutiny of what was happening. And in the end, 2 policemen were sent to jail as a result of that for 3 years each. Now, there's a twist to this, and the technology twist to this, yes, that's use of social media, yes, that's use of Web 2.0, and that's fantastic. However, the YouTube element, and this isn't a dig at YouTube, this is a broader point about how social media are not designed by activists or for activists. YouTube, somebody flagged the videos that were on YouTube. They didn't have any context on them or anything. So basically, those videos were taken down. And then Weil's YouTube account was suspended. All across the internet, wherever they'd been embedded, on the hub, on blogs, news websites, didn't matter. They all went dark. And they all went dark because the human review processes don't work in large, broad, open spaces like this. And when you think about forward towards visual search, you think forward towards automated processes, they're not going to work. Because how can these processes genuinely distinguish what is a piece of human rights footage? Now, when we've got this much, it's going to be okay. At the moment, the hub runs a manual screening process. But when we have this much, it's going to be a little bit more complicated. So the question for me is, how can we make more equal more? We're talking about, at the moment, 1.2 billion, something like that, people online around the world. There's 6.6 billion people. Once they're all uploading stuff, we're going to be swimming in information. We're going to be swimming in all kinds of content and context. So we do have to, in the spirit of what Tim was talking about, we have to take the long view. We have to think about this in the future. This was something that somebody, when we were going around and talking to people, I'm just using this as an illustration of the fact that it's hard. Oh my God, you guys are so the martyrs for the rest of us. And this is what one sort of person in the human rights sphere said. And it's really just to say, this is hard work. It's not easy to think about. It's not something that that the technology industry has had to grapple with really before. And really, if we're thinking about sustainability, we're thinking about all these different things, we're going to have to grapple with these ideas. We built the hub really and this is today's front page, it's 50 years since the uprising in Tibet, to do several things, to aggregate content from around the web, to analyze, to provide extra context, add value, allow people to participate and add value themselves, and to push people towards action. Because really, people are running the risks of their lives. They are risking their lives to film this stuff. And it needs to go somewhere. It needs to do something. And in larger social media spaces, it often gets lost. It's a rough flowchart of what we try and do. And one of the elements that we try and do is deliver training through the hub. What we're trying to do is design it for safety and security. There are a number of layers of safety and security, which I'll talk about in the other session, which I'm doing in the Valley Room later. Part of open culture. Joey Ito, who I think is here, is on our board, and we've tried to integrate Creative Commons, where it's built in open source. We're trying to sort of really build a site that's part of the open culture movement. And draw on collective eyes and ears. Use the power of visual imagery. Use context, because without context, visual imagery doesn't go further. It doesn't lead to action. And the power of personal stories. This is something that's tremendously important. People talking about their experiences. It's not just graphic footage of people being beaten. It's people saying what happened, how they claimed their rights, how things changed as a result of what they did. What can technology do? Well, we can bake in human rights from the beginning. I think we need to think about that. One of the things is not just what the technology is, but how people use it and how they gain access to it. And I'd really, really encourage people to talk to activists, because people are using the tools. They will use your tools in different ways, whether it's Basecamp or whatever. They're using everything. Challenges I see ahead, live casting human rights. This is going to be a massive ethical challenge. How are we going to deal with stuff when you're filming and it's happening in real time? And that's happening more and more with mobile. How are we going to distinguish stuff when it's ubiquitous? And then visual search. I don't know if anyone saw that New York Times piece about the kid who was searching about the duck-billed platypus, but it definitely made me think a lot about how search is going to change. And we're going to have to think about that. Also what Bill from Electronic Frontier Foundation was talking about in Ignite. And then last, this is the clip. This is the quote that really stays with me from the beginning of the project. You guys are jumping off the cliff, and we're not going to jump with you. That was a human rights organization. I'm inviting you to jump with me. Thank you very much.